So we're seeing what's really going on with the teachers' unions now. In a way that I've got to say, I'm pleased in a sense. I'm pleased that there's greater clarity now than there has been in a long time about what the teachers' unions really stand for. And if you're wondering, in New York, they have shown up to protest carrying fake coffins, or I guess just coffins without bodies in them, and guillotines. And they have been chanting things. This is the line I'm trying to find for you. Children cannot learn if they're dead. What they're saying in this New York Post article. That's right. If they have to go to school, they're going to die. Children are going to die. Everyone's going to die. Meanwhile, I know from my grocery store, my neighborhood, where I've been going in person to get groceries since the beginning of the pandemic, including when New York was the worst hit place in the entire world. People have been showing up to do their job there for months and months and months, interacting with adults in close quarters, and they're fine. So I want to know, is that an unacceptable health hazard? They're doing their jobs. The people who work in the building where I live, the guys who work in maintenance and the people who work in the package room, they're doing their jobs. I'm doing my job. A lot of you are doing your jobs if you're fortunate enough to still have one, considering the government has basically shut us down and told us that we're not allowed to work in a lot of places. Teachers aren't supposed to do their job? Why? I haven't seen a good, because they might get COVID. Everybody might get COVID from walking out of their house. But you're also seeing that they know that there's an election coming up and that the Democrats are a necessary constituency. I'm sorry, the teachers' unions are a necessary constituency for the Democrat Party to get elected, right? The power, the money that goes into Democrat coffers from teachers' unions, immense. Teachers' unions, the American Federation of Teachers, all these different groups, they're like a giant PAC for Democrats, a political action committee for them, with enormous donations from all over the country and a tremendous amount of political power and ability to mobilize. That's what this is about. It's not about kids. But that just goes to show you, too. These are the people that are going to be showing up, at least in New York, and trying to teach your children. They think it's reasonable to dress up in skeleton costumes and carry coffins and guillotines and say children can't learn if they're dead. When will kids be allowed to go back to school? Oh, this is all based on the whim of Democrat politicians. We understand that, right? That there is no future in which there is a 100% safety that can be guaranteed for children in any school anywhere from disease, and not just from COVID-19. Every year children die from the flu. That is what happens. No discussion about this somehow. No discussion about how we never shut down schools in the past, even for very bad flu seasons. So why are we doing this? Chicago is now the third largest school district in the country shut down. New York may be open partially. They're still figuring out the plan, going back and forth on this. What are the chances that Democrats sweep to election victories if most school districts in the country, most major school districts in the country are shut down? I think everyone realizes it's a bit higher. This is an intensely political issue. Europe has opened up their schools. So why can't we open up our schools? No one seems to answer this question. Places that have been worse hit by coronavirus than we have as a country have schools open and they're fine. I'm not saying there's no cases. I'm not saying there's no risk. But since when do we run public policy based on a promise of zero risk? We don't do that. Democrats will try that sometimes with gun laws. If it saves one life, they'll say. We don't do that with anything else in public life. If it saves one life, we're going to dramatically change a fundamental right, or we're going to make sweeping policy based upon this. If it could theoretically save one life, that's not the way we run a society. It's not the way we run a country, because there's no end to that. There are a lot of things you could do to save just one life, right? A lot of things. You could ban all bicycles are dangerous. Ban all bicycles across the country. Not allowed to ride a bicycle. People die every year riding on bicycles. You're going to ban them all? No, right? I mean, we don't have to go down this road, but it's philosophically, this is where the Democrats are. They're making false arguments constantly. They're making arguments in bad faith. And if you're wondering how how that's possible. They have people like the worst mayor in the United States of America. I know some of you are yelling out the mayor from your city, because if you're in a major city, and I know we got listeners in San Diego and in Austin and in Minneapolis and in Baltimore, and we got a lot of cities with crap mayors. But I still claim, I think we're number one here in New York with Bill de Blasio, the worst mayor in America. And here is, we had this storm system that came through yesterday. I think about a half a dozen people were killed by falling debris, and it was a very serious storm. Here's what de Blasio says was the reason for this. Play 13.
Let's talk about the bigger reality. What we're seeing here, and what we've been seeing now for years, is the result of global warming. We've been seeing more and more pressure on coastal areas all around the world. Some of you may have been following the horrible flooding in Bangladesh right now. We have a big Bangladeshi community here in this city. We're seeing problems in cities all over the world because of global warming. This is not an abstraction.
We're shut down. We're facing the rental and retail apocalypse in America's largest city. I've seen it. I mean, I've walked around streets. I went to the Upper East Side, which is one of the fanciest, most well-known neighborhoods in all of New York City. And I went there to get my hair cut because I need to get a haircut. I walk around. There's empty storefronts everywhere. I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen so many empty storefronts in the retail and commercial sector of the Upper East Side. And you got people that are going to be getting evicted from now, probably not in the wealthiest neighborhoods, but in the rest of the city getting evicted from their apartments. And de Blasio wants us to worry about flooding in other cities because of global warming. This guy's a loon. He is a loon. And that's what I think we all need to recognize here. That's what I think we all need to understand. The people that are in charge, that are calling the shots in a lot of places across America, are a bunch of irresponsible dumbasses. Let's just say it. Let's understand it. Let's be very clear about it. And then we also have the showdown right now over whether we're going to get $1 trillion sent to cities across this country, courtesy of the federal government, state and local governments, I should say, as a result of the shortfalls from COVID-19. You know, New York feels like it can stay shut down, and a lot of other cities like this too stay in a relative state of shutdown as long as they need to, because, the taxpayer is going to backstop all this anyway. So we'll keep all of our stuff going. Well, the Republicans are giving a little bit of fight back on this. Not nearly enough fight on a whole lot of things, but they are pushing back on this a little bit. So you know what de Blasio is saying? At a time when the city of New York has, and I'm using this really as the canary in the coal mine for the rest of you, because you're going to see this happen in your state and your city, especially if either of those things are blue, which if you're in a city, it definitely is blue. Your state, maybe. But even places like Texas are going to have big problems as a result of this if this continues. You have the threat to fire at a time when New York has skyrocketing murder rate relative to what it was last year. You have a threat to just completely implode this place. Play 80. I'm sorry, 8.
Well, my challenge is, where am I going to have the people to do this work? I may have to do as many as layoffs of 22,000 city employees from every department by October 1st if I don't get federal help. So I know we can handle all these problems. We've proven we can before, but we can't do it without the skilled personnel, the cops, the firefighters, the healthcare workers, the teachers. That's the biggest threat right now. What if that federal aid doesn't come and time is a wasting? Well,
now the Democrats, as you know, philosophically are committed to spending as much money as they want whenever they want. Right? That's that they think that the federal government creates wealth. That it makes now at some level that is true. If the federal government put $1 million in your bank account, you would be a millionaire. Or some of you listening probably are. Congratulations. But if they put $1 million in your account, you're a millionaire. If the federal government put $1 million in every American's bank account, right, just to work through our thought experiment, they would destroy American currency and the U.S. economy. right? The dollar would no longer be worth anything. The reserve currency status would go away. We would have huge problems, right? We would effectively dissolve America in real time if they did that. Now, they're not saying they're going to do that, but they are saying let's spend us into oblivion. A Reuters piece just from a few hours ago. As dollar slides, some investors fret about its status as world's reserve currency, potentially accelerating accelerating what has been a slow erosion of the greenback status as the dominant reserve currency. This piece says investors and analysts, including billionaire hedge fund manager Ray Dalio and Goldman Sachs group strategist, are among those who have warned that massive U.S. government spending could really hurt the dollar. At the same time, rock-bottom U.S. interest rates for the foreseeable future and concerns over a potential rise in inflation are denting the dollar's appeal. These factors are already weighing on the dollar, which stands 9% below its high of the year and notched the worst monthly performance in a decade in July. This is this Reuters piece. It's very important, folks. This affects everything. And if you care about the economy or not, the economy cares about you, and this is the foundation of our economy that is getting chipped at, kicked at, blasted by the reckless spending and the government policies that we've seen for a long time, but they've gotten a lot worse recently. Changes that may affect the dollar's reserve currency status have historically been glacial, according to the chief strategist at Deutsche Bank. Lately, they have been speeding up. The dollar's dominance endows the U.S. with many benefits, ranging from an outsized influence over the world's financial system to giving it the power to flex its muscle abroad by punishing rivals and bringing errant foreign players to heel. For the world's central bankers, the dollar remains the reserve currency of choice by far. The dollar's share of global central bank reserves stood at 62% in the first quarter, compared with 20% for the euro and 1.9% for the yuan. That's according to the IMF. Foreign holdings of U.S. treasuries, considered among the world's safest investments, rose to $6.86 trillion in May. The only reason, as I see it, that we have not had a much more rapid deceleration of the dollar is that the whole world is in a state of economic difficulty, right? So we might be still better relative to the rest, but if other countries are opening up and get going and get their economies, get not just COVID under control, but get their economies roaring again. China's the one we're obviously looking at the most closely for this. The disparity, the shift that can happen will be sudden and impactful. It will be meaningful. And what do we do then? Right, what do we do then when people start to say, well, the U.S. is still dragging this out. China's up and running again. Maybe I got to start thinking about buying more Chinese renminbi or Chinese yuan going forward. Maybe that's where I want. Maybe I want the Chinese government to owe me money, not the U.S. government. My friends, if that happens, we are all, every single person listening to this, everyone in America, all in a worse financial situation than we are right now. If that becomes the global perception, what do you think the Chinese are planning with all this? Why do you think the Chinese are doing what they're doing lately vis-a-vis us and the rest of the world? Why do you think they didn't try to stop the virus from getting outside of their own borders? They're playing a game of great power politics, and we have Joe Biden not passing the cognitive test of giving an interview where he doesn't sound like a moron. I can't believe we're losing our house that we didn't even sell. That's what Deborah said when she found out that she was the victim of home title theft, which is a crime that can cost you your home. Here's how it works. The bad guys can find your information online. They can forge your signature and then claim that you sold your home to them. Sometimes you won't even find out about this until the eviction notice arrives. You've got to protect yourself right now, and the way to do that is with Home Title Lock. Home Title Lock creates a virtual barrier around your home's title. You can go right now to HometitleLock.com and use promo code BUCK to find out if you're already a victim of this crime, and you can also get 30 free days of protection. Go now. Don't wait until it's too late. Go to HometitleLock.com, use promo code BUCK for 30 free days of protection, and to see if you're already a victim of home title theft. Again, take action now. HometitleLock.com, promo code BUCK. I'm not the only one who thinks old man Biden is a laughable option for the presidency based just on his current state. Joe Rogan, biggest podcaster in the world, and a guy with a lot of influence on the national conversation without seeming like he's trying too hard to have it, right? You got Rogan, you got Stool Presidente, Dave Portnoy. These guys, they have far more influence on what particularly American males are thinking than CBS Evening News or one of these places. Here's what Rogan said. Rogan said he was going to vote for Bernie Sanders. Now, I'll say this. Bernie Sanders, a crazy commie, but I never heard him start spouting gibberish and everything. So you can make a case that Bernie Sanders, even though, I think he's a little older than Biden, I think. Producer Nick, check me out, or Producer Mark, check me on that one. But Sanders, it never seemed like he lacked clarity up top, so to speak. Here's what Joe Rogan says about Biden. 11.
I believe there's an also large group of people that are very uncomfortable with a man who seems to be mentally compromised winning the election and doing so by hiding. I mean, the guy's never, he was just at another thing the other day and he forgot where he was.
Why is that okay? I mean, the Democrats have created this circumstance where they're all just going to have to look you in the eye and say, yeah, Biden's great. We don't see any decline in his cognitive ability. We don't see any problem here whatsoever. Meanwhile, what they'll put Trump through, which is just maddening, is no matter what he says, they will trash it. And this has always been the case. I know that. But no matter what the subject matter is, they'll distort what he says just to fit into the Trump is an ignoramus and he's the worst and all this other stuff that they say. Here's the president trying to differentiate absentee ballots and the systems in place for them from a universal mail-in voting program that Democrats want to institute weeks before a nationwide election during a pandemic. Play 17.
Absentee is okay because you have to go through a process, Brian, and you go through a process and you make a request and they send it to you and you get it and you fill it out, and it's a process and it's a smaller number. What they're going to do is blanket the state. Anybody that ever walked, frankly, will get one. And the governor's a clubhouse politician. He's somebody that, frankly, was shocking, and shocking what he did, more shocking what he did. Without town halls, without meetings, without the public, they went out and they just approved this ridiculous system, and the post office will never be equipped to handle it. And you see it in New York in a much smaller scale. We have a congressional race, Carolyn Maloney, a congresswoman.
Yeah. The scale matters here, right? The planning matters. This pretense that, it's just so easy, we're just going to all the mail-in vote. They're going to be sending ballots in there's no quality control in this whatsoever. They're going to be sending ballots to people who are either dead or don't exist or aren't registered or don't live there. There'll be ballots floating around. They'll allow ballot harvesting. People can just show up and take a ballot, say, this was, John so-and-so's ballot, and hand it in. In New York, they're even saying, they're even counting ballots that weren't postmarked by the date because they said there was a problem with the postmarking system. Well, imagine that. I mean, now that means you could have voted a week late. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just there's no effort whatsoever to be fair-minded about this. Trump explained the difference, and the media flipped out about this. Now he says that Florida can do mail-in. Yeah, well, there are some places that have been doing a mail-in program for a long time and have greater preparation. Nationwide mail-in balloting? We all know. We just did this in New York, okay? We just ran this. Carolyn Maloney, member of Congress, Democrat. We just saw what happens. And it's a disaster.
Bill O'Reilly here, and I need your help. Millions of Americans who believe that the USA is a noble nation are furious about what they're seeing in the streets. They're angry about anarchy being enabled by a dishonest media that is promoting hatred toward America. That's why we launched the Stand Up for Your Country campaign on BillO'Reilly.com. I knew it was going to be big. I didn't know it was going to be this big. We've had hundreds of thousands of signups, and we are flooding the zone with new stickers. Folks love these stickers. But most importantly, we have a philosophy. America is a good country, and we are going to prove that to you night after night. We hope you'll become a premium member on BillO'Reilly.com so you can access everything we do and join the campaign. But if you don't want to do that, just come on in and read what we have. Stand up for your country, because if you do not, we're going to lose it. Check out BillO'Reilly.com and join the campaign.
Before I begin, it is day 42 of the botched New York City primary, where still there is no election results in one congressional race. This, as the New York Times notes, is due to, quote, the deluge of 400,000 mail-in ballots, previewing the, quote, challenges facing the nation as it looks towards conducting the November general election with mass mail-in voting.
Yeah, it's been a disaster. There you had White House Press Secretary Kelly McEnany just establishing for anyone listening exactly what a mess mail-in balloting has been in New York. And remember, the Democrat mentality in all of this is going to be that they want mail-in balloting because it'll either help them win, or if they lose, they'll claim that it was a fraudulent election and the Republicans cheated. And they will even, I told you this has been my prediction, they will even say that mail-in balloting that they demanded was abused and part of the fraud. So that they get what they want, and then they claim if they lose that in getting what they want, they made the election less secure. Democrats have no principles about this stuff. They don't care. They don't care. And if you try and speak some sense to them about any of this, they get very, very snippy. CNN anchor, we don't even need to say her name, doesn't matter. A CNN anchor, another one of their kind of second team folks over at CNN, has decided that, they're just going to all be partisans now. Even the ones that were kind of pretending that they're just going to read the news and, I'm a journalist. They're all partisans. And here she is with Mercedes Schlapp talking about voter fraud. And the claim that the CNN anchor made was that there is no voter fraud. Now, we can debate how much voter fraud there is, but the statement, there is no voter fraud, is incorrect. People go to prison every year for voter fraud. Voter fraud exists, and we probably catch a very small percentage of what does exist. We don't know. There's really no systematic way to gauge something that's that, how many, here, let me ask you this. How many people go to prison every year for cheating on their taxes? Not very many. People do go to prison for it. How many people do you think in America are cheating on their taxes? We all understand intuitively it's a lot. It's a lot. But very few people actually go to prison. Now, I'm somebody who believes that really you should just make financial restitution and pay a fine. I don't believe that people should go to prison, especially a first-time offense for tax violations. Maybe if they're like egregious, if you refuse to ever pay income tax or something. But I think it should be very, very hard to get sent to prison for tax fraud. And it's pretty, that said, there's not that many people that go every year. But I'm just using it to illustrate the example. We know it exists. We know it happens. And just because we don't catch it all the time, that doesn't mean that we know what the real scale of it is. Same thing can be said of voter fraud. We know it exists. We know it happens. People do go to prison for it. But the belief that anybody has, that any Democrat, of course, now conveniently would have, that voter fraud is not a real concern. This is just based on what they think should be true, not what is true. And when you try to call them out on this, you get stuff like this. Play 3.
November 3rd.
Mercedes,
Yes or no?
you're saying that voter fraud is a thing, and I'm telling you that it's not. And you're muddying the
okay,
waters. And I also wonder, don't you worry that that's going to actually hurt you? I mean, isn't that to the point why the president has said when it comes...
Okay. Issues. They have left thousands
Mercedes,
of those
I'm asking...
I'm just going...
Mercedes, Mercedes,
we can go have
this is like so... This is just pointless. Okay? This is pointless. I get it. You're just saying a bunch of crap. Okay? You're saying a bunch of crap.
Can I tell you what? No. Let me tell you.
We're talking about we're talking about voting in a pandemic. We're talking. Okay.
You don't let them have a conversation with them.
We're talking about voting in a pandemic. What you're saying is a bunch of crap. Would you ever see anyone on CNN as an anchor, a news anchor, say to a member of the Biden campaign or advisor to the Biden campaign or, whatever, that what they're saying is a bunch of crap after saying something as demonstrably, stupidly false as voter fraud is not a thing. It's not a thing. It is a thing. You can say it's not a big thing. Fine. It is a thing, right? Would you ever say to somebody, police shooting unarmed civilians is not a thing, doesn't exist? No, that would be wrong. In fact, it's very rare, but Democrats insist we talk about it all the time, right? It's incredibly rare, but we have to talk about it all the time. But I can't say to you and expect not to be criticized for saying something untrue. Police never shoot unarmed, innocent people, right? So this is what I mean. We all have to play by the same rules. Either a statement is true or it is not. There is no voter fraud. Voter fraud is not a thing that exists. Is incorrect. It's a lie. We can argue about the severity of it, but you see, this is really just jockeying for position for what will be best for Democrats to win the election. Of course. Well, I have to go. I wait in line to go to the UPS store, to go get groceries. I eat at restaurants outdoors now. I'm doing all these things here. And yeah, there's these annoying restrictions. I got the mask and the social distancing and all this stuff. I'm not going to do this to vote once? Really? I got to tell you, folks, it's pretty transparent what they're doing, but they don't care. They have no integrity to protect, which means that they have a lot of leeway, a lot of things that they can do here. And I'm also wondering what happens when assuming, and I don't know, and I understand some things about COVID-19 in terms of predictions, I've been very correct on. Other things I've been wrong. And I will admit that to you. A lot of other people will never admit these sorts of things. They want to pretend that they're perfect and they're all seeing and all this other stuff. I did think that in the summer it would go down dramatically as the flu does. Didn't happen. There are some reasons that people are theorizing about that, but that was a surprise to me, right? I do think that we are in the downward slope. This is just based on the data trend right now. I do think we're in the downward slope of a lot of these major outbreaks across the country in large states with big populations, and they're going to mirror what we've seen happen in New York and New Jersey, where you had a terrible outbreak, and now I think we had 4 people die in New York State from COVID-19. 4. There are 20 million people in New York State. 4 of them died from COVID-19. And we're still like shut down pretty much. I mean, you can do some things, but no indoor stuff, no large gatherings, masking everywhere, constantly being, just harassed by the moral busybodies of the left. We would all defeat the virus if you would just listen to Biden. Sure, that seems reasonable if you're an imbecile. But what's going to happen if we get close to the election? It turns out that we're far. I mean, in New York right now, to tell everybody you had to go vote tomorrow, that would be complete. There's no database reason for us not to do that, really. What happens if we're a lot of other places in the same position, but then we also have the mail-in voting? What was that all for? Well, this is why Democrats are pushing so hard for it now. Even though they don't have the structures in place, they're pushing for it. And if they don't get their way, they're going to play it both ways. If they get enough mail-in balloting going and they lose, they'll say that they think the mail-in balloting was actually a place where Republicans were committing fraud or that there were uncounted ballots. They'll blame the system. Or if they don't get enough mail-in balloting, then they'll say, well, this was an unfair election because our demands were not conceded. I know this, it's like arguing with a 5-year-old, right? It doesn't matter. They're going to have a problem with it no matter what you do. So just be prepared for that. The president spoke yesterday about where we are on COVID and gave some very important facts and figures I think everybody needs to hear. Let's get to that.
The knowledge we have gained about the disease itself, the recent rise in cases, has not been accompanied by a significant increase in deaths. Fatalities nationwide are at roughly half the level of the April peak. So the number of deaths or fatalities are at half the level. One is too much, one death, because this should have never happened to us. It should have been stopped very easily by China in Wuhan. Thanks to our major advances in treatment, we've seen vast improvements in recovery rates across all age groups. Compared to April, mortality rates are 85% lower among individuals aged 18 to 69 and 70% lower among individuals over 70 years old. We've also made significant strides in sheltering those at highest risk, especially the elderly. Approximately 85% of all current cases are individuals under the age of 65. Just getting some very accurate numbers on this. And these are people who are generally at a much lower risk of complications.
Under 65, 85% decline in mortality based upon cases. Over 70, I think he said, or over 65, a 70% decline. So those are very important numbers, because you keep seeing the caseload number go up, and we are doing a tremendous amount of testing. And so, yes, we're finding more cases, including of people that beat this in very reasonable time frame, don't get that sick, or barely have any symptoms at all. But the case number is what is getting people so frightened in a lot of parts of the country. And it's why you have a lot of policies that are now rolling back reopens and pushing for a return to sort of the more panicked mindset about all of this. But let's remember that they know more about the virus than they did 6 months ago. Doctors and hospitals are more effective at dealing with it than they were. There's not a cure, but they're more effective at handling the symptoms and knowing what to do. There is really promising data from a large study published that just came out today that the mortality rate for very ill people in the hospital, if they're given convalescent plasma, is 50% lower. So, and that's a big, very well put together study. So that's encouraging. There are reasons for optimism here. As I've been saying all along, we were going to get hit badly by this virus. And I'm just going to point this out too. A lot of the data is showing that, obesity and diabetes are the really big comorbidity issues with this virus, alongside with advanced age, but obesity and the comorbidity issue, obesity and diabetes. And I'm just going to say this. I think it's obvious that, people are much less healthy and have gained, a lot of people I know have gained substantial weight. 6 months of really not being able to leave your house, not being able to go to the gym, being constantly told that, the world is ending. People have gained real weight. It's not helping. This is not helping. Our immune systems and our ability to fight off disease is a critical component of this. And government policy is hurting us in that regard. The government policy has made it, I think, a lot more difficult for us to stay generally healthy, including to keep our immune systems ready for fighting against this. Trump continued, though, on the declining mortality rate and the facts and figures around COVID as it stands now, or at least yesterday evening. Play 2.
Since the pandemic began, nearly half of all fatalities have been at nursing homes or assisted living centers. That's an incredible statistic when you hear that number. This data underscores that the best path forward is an aggressive strategy focused on protecting Americans at highest risk. As we race toward the development of a vaccine, we must continue to take extraordinary precautions to shield the elderly, and we're doing that. We're doing that at a level that we've never even dreamt possible, both with testing and with common sense. And those with underlying conditions, especially the elderly with the underlying, whether it's heart or diabetes, they seem to be the two most predominant conditions that cause tremendous problems, while allowing those at lowest risk to carefully return to work and to school. Where embers flare up, we must engage immediately.
So when you look at the numbers and you look at what's really happening, it's a different narrative than what you're getting you're getting from the mainstream media. I talked to Alex Berenson last night, and he's got his book out, Unreported Truths about COVID, which he sold, I think, over 100,000 copies on Amazon. Which to sell that for a book without any publisher behind it and to self-publish, that's pretty astonishing. But the coronavirus positive tests in the last 2 weeks in Florida, Berenson points out, have fallen 60% in the last 2 weeks. Positive tests, I should say, not testing. Positive tests in Florida have fallen 60%. Hospitalizations are down right now 20% from the peak in Florida. So you have far fewer positive tests and substantially less people in the hospital with COVID. Are you seeing that reported anywhere? And I also like this point that Berenson makes here about, we're always told that there's another way that we could have made this whole thing go away. Says Japan is a nation of 130 million that never had a lockdown and never had mass testing and has had the least severe epidemic of any major country. But they say that doesn't really count. Why? We should investigate what is it about Japan that no mass lockdown. We're going to say that this is all about masks. Is that what we're really going to fall back on? I don't know what to tell you, folks, other than people are so dug in now on this. They're never going to change. They're never going to change. They will refuse to believe that they've been wrong on this, like so many other areas of their lives. The lockdown libs are. It's a bit like the climate change thing now, where people couldn't deal with. Look, if I find out that all we had to do is, if there's real science to show that all we had to do is wear masks the whole time and this whole thing would have gone away, I'll come on air and say mea culpa. I've been wearing masks though for months because I have to, because I'm in New York. Anywhere I go, I got to wear a mask. I don't wear it in my apartment by myself, but I don't really do anything else. So we're not even having serious conversations about what could have been done differently. We're having politicized conversations about it. And people look at the data in a very cherry-picked fashion. They don't want to talk about the conclusion of the top health authorities in Sweden and the Netherlands saying that we don't need to wear masks. Instead, it's just Trump is basically Hitler and everyone's dying because he's the worst person ever. That's what you get, including from a lot of public health authorities. People that are out there. One moment Nancy Pelosi and the rest of the Democrat gang are saying, where's Dr. Birx? And then Nancy wants to know, the Chardonnay socialist, where's Dr. Birx? Where's Dr. Fauci? When Nancy wakes up from her nap, now she's saying Dr. Birx is bad. I don't know what it'll be next week.